All right. I'm having a wonderful talk, as I do with so many fabulous musicians in America and throughout the world. I just am having it's a great reward for me to have the opportunity to speak to so many brilliant musicians. But I'm speaking tonight with Andrès Cárdenes, uh, Cuban-born violinist. We're going to be speaking about his 2019 Artec CD with pianist Elizabeth Pridgeon. What a wonderful pianist, incredible pianist, and the Vega String Quartet. Two fabulous late Romantic French Belgian, maybe. We'll talk about that tradition in a bit. Composers Ernest Chausson, the concert for violin, piano, and string quartet. I want to know whether I've heard that. I don't think I've ever heard that before. Is it performed often or not?
No, not really. It's not performed often. And the reason is that it's very, very difficult to get a really good group of six people.
Yeah.
You need a formed quartet to do the quartet part of that really, really well.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really highlight the quartets. A lot of quartets don't like playing it. And the piano is extremely difficult, extremely unwieldy. And so the violinist really gets all the glory in that piece. So, which I don't mind.
Ego is part of the difficulty, but I wondered because this Ernest Chausson concert for violin, piano, and string quartet is a fabulous work from 1891, I think, right there in the thick of the late Romantic period in Europe, and then also this Chausson piece is paired with Gabriel Fauré, the sonata, the A major sonata, Opus 13 for violin and piano. And we're going to talk about the Isai connection, the teacher of your teacher, and so on. This CD, it's an Artec CD release from 2019. I mentioned was recorded we've talked a little bit before I pushed record, but in Emerson Concert Hall at Emory University in Atlanta. Tom Stevenson is the recording engineer and master, and as I have said to everybody, I'm not a techie at all. I'm a musician, and when things sound right, I know you have a magnificent sound engineer, and that's what you have on this recording. Everything sounds exactly the way it should. The balancing, the quality of the sound of the instruments, and so on. So you'll talk to me a little bit about Tom Stevenson in a bit. Andrès Cárdenes studied with Joseph Gingold at Indiana University, Grammy nominated. Go ahead, take a nap while I go through this. You've heard it a million times. Second prize winner at the 1982 Tchaikovsky competition. Soloist all over the world. We're talking fiddle soloist, okay, violinist. These are the perks of winning a major competition, of course. Instant recognition and lots of traveling and touring. But you've been distinguished professor of violin studies and the Dorothy Richard Starling Alexander Speyer Jr. Endowed Chair at Carnegie Mellon University School of Music. Sounds like a lot of words, but it's important. We need to recognize those people that pick up the tab.
Yeah,
Very
definitely.
important these days. Since when? How long have you been at Carnegie Mellon?
I'm coming up to my 30th year, and
Wow.
I've been the Starling recipient for about 25 of those years.
Wow. Okay. So apparently you have tenure.
Yeah,
Sorry.
They,
Sorry.
they can't get rid of me very easily.
The reason I ask is, of course, I'll engage and review a CD, and then right toward the time when I think I'm okay and I have a couple of weeks, I'm hit up with, oh, I've got a tenure report due. Can you get this done for me? Anyway, so there you are. And I remember Carnegie Mellon from a long time ago. In the 1980s, when I conducted American Collegiate Symphony Orchestra, and the biggest, this was like university players from all over the country, the biggest bunch were from Carnegie Mellon. They just jumped on this opportunity to go to London. Anyway, so very big and important school of music. What I want to know is when. It's a dumb question. I ask it all the time, but so it isn't dumb. What, how, when did fiddle happen? Did it happen in Cuba when you were 3? What? Tell me about the backstory of violin and you.
Well, it's a rather unusual story because neither one of my parents are musicians. My mother played the piano as a kid. I think my father is probably a born musician, but he grew up in Cuba in a very poor family and didn't have the opportunity. And so when we moved to America, I was about 10 years old, actually a little younger, 9 years old. And my father brought home a recording by Victor Tretyakov playing the Paganini First Violin Concerto. He had just won the Tchaikovsky competition. And my father had a lot of recordings on all the time. Rite of Spring, The Four Seas. He would just blast it through the house. He loved it. And he would always like faux conduct them. You know, he was not a conductor and not a musician, but he would walk around the house and conduct the Rite of Spring. And um, and so when he brought this recording home, I heard it and I said, Dad, listen to all those violin players. And he said, well, that's one guy playing. And then that just struck a nerve with me. And then coincidentally, about 2, 3 months later, a lady came to my public school, May Mulholland, and she said, I'm going to start a music program here. Whoever wants to learn an instrument, bring your parents. And of course, I dragged my parents to the orientation meeting, and my life and my career and everything coalesced in the course of about a minute, because when I walked in the door, I went straight to the violin, and I knew that this was going to be my life's work. I just knew it. And there was no talking me into trying to clarinet or anything else. And I told my parents, I said, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And they thought I was crazy, of course, but I wasn't wrong. I knew what I was going to do. I mean, I was hit by a bolt of lightning. It really was. I don't care what you want to call it, a force or God or whatever it is, but there was an immediate calling and an immediate attraction and an immediate commitment to it too.
And if I may say, as a young kid who was totally turned on by piccolo, fourth grade, I saw a piccolo play, one of those movie demos of all the orchestra instruments. They quickly downsized me to flute, and then decided in the 50s that flute was far too sissy an instrument for a boy to play. Let's just stick a clarinet in your mouth, kid. So I'm glad you didn't take up clarinet. I hate to be to denigrate clarinet so much, but I sort of started with clarinet, and that's why I became a conductor. I got away from it as fast as I could. No offense, forgive me, everyone who is a professional clarinetist out there. It's a marvelous instrument. Just some things are meant for us and some things are not. And you have just described an instantaneous message from whatever, a lightning bolt, as you described it, to become a fiddle player. So you started violin. Did it come easily to you, or did you have moments where you said, get me out of here?
No, I immediately I undertook the school program, and it was a 2-year program, and 4 months later I had finished it. And my teacher said, wait a minute, we got to get you a private teacher right away. And then I had the incredibly good fortune of studying with a man named Salvatore Crimi. He was a studio musician in Los Angeles. He was Italian. And, he would come to my lesson, and for the hour lesson, 45 minutes, he just played for me. And he played Meditation from Thais or pieces by Chrysler. And he kept showing me fingerings and slides and how to make a beautiful sound. And then occasionally he would accompany himself by playing notes that were in the piano part while he was playing the violin part. And this made a huge impression on me because early on my ear got very attuned and very attracted to getting a beautiful sound. And really that became my calling card in my lifetime as a violinist is my sound. I'm not a wizard of the violin like a lot of people, and I'm not a perfect violin player like a lot of other people, but my sound is, those are my fingerprints on the instrument. And I think that at that very early stage, I kept hearing this violin playing, and it truly very deeply influenced me. And then from that point on, it was just basically it was a roller coaster from there, and it was all down. I just flew with the violin, and very quickly started performing and played some difficult pieces early on in my career. And before I knew it, I was very deeply into it. But then, by the time I was about 13, however, I became very enamored with Leonard Bernstein, and I thought it was incredible that he played the piano. He was a conductor and, of course, an incredible composer. And so I had these crazy illusions that this is my new role model and that this is what I was going to do. And so I did start to take conducting quite seriously. I did write a few pieces when I was young with no supervision, just sort of on the fly. And then in my youth orchestra, our conductor was very, very kind. I taught him quite a bit about conducting, and one day he surprised me and gave me the baton. And he said, "Here, you conduct the orchestra now for the next half hour." And I got a big thrill out of it. And then from that point, I started conducting in my high school at Interlochen and took lessons there, conducting lessons there with Thor Johnson, and then went on to Indiana and studied with Brian Balkwill. And so my conducting was doing very well. My composition, however, was not doing so well. And I was writing, a fair number of things, but I found out something through the process, and that was something that was revelatory, because one of the rarest traits in a musician is to be a creative and recreative artist. There are very, very few that could say they do that. Leonard Bernstein was one of them, and that's a very small percentage. I'm talking about somebody who could write music and then recreate other people's music at the same level. It's almost impossible. It's so difficult. I found that the skill I had was in the recreative area, not in the creative. And so even though I continued my composition lessons, it was very important for me to continue, because as I found out later, people were writing pieces for me, asking me to premiere them. And my knowledge of orchestration and contemporary techniques and notation and things of that nature made it so that I could work with the composers and help them write pieces that were, I guess, intuitive to the violinist, and how to write passage work that was more or less in the vein that a violinist would write. Not just a composer would just write the notes, but rather give them more of an intuitive feeling of how it could be written. So the composition part, even though I was not successful at it, it came in very, very handy later on in my career.
Now it's very interesting that we hit on this topic. I can't compose to save my behind since a kid. I don't have the patience. I don't want to spend 40 hours writing 3 minutes. Are you crazy? Let alone, orchestration and transcribe, all that stuff. I just can't do it, but I am a recreator in the sense that, that's what I love. I love to other people's work and to discover the sub-basements and the subtexts and the colors and, balancing all that. That's why I'm I suppose, more or less retired now, but that's why I went into conducting as a kid. And I had the same experience. I started the Santa Barbara Youth Symphony here when I was 15, 16 years old, and adults let me have that experience, and one or two would step in and mortify me in front of my colleagues. You remember how that might have been, when an adult comes in and does that. But basically that's the thing in conducting, as you know very well. You've got to get out there and have the tough knocks and have the experience in a band room somewhere with willing young musicians, and kind of learn the craft of conducting that way. And by the way, I think we've mentioned you conduct the Carnegie Mellon University Philharmonic Orchestra. I can tell just from the photographs, you know what I mean? Just from the photos, how you hold that stick, what your attitude and approach is, your facial movements, facial expressions, all of that it's a very natural thing for you, let alone as a violinist. So you have it way up on me. I studied with Henry Temyanka, violinist Henry Temyanka in Los Angeles, and the violinists know all the tricks. I hate you for that. To get that enormous, gorgeous, tremendous sound, and there are tricks. There are special things that string players know, and I'm going to be forever thankful to Henry Temyanka for showing me one or two, not all of them, but one or two techniques about how to have a big, lovely sound. Same thing with Heiichiro Oyama, violist. What a master of making an orchestra string sound so elegant, so special. So when did you leave Cuba? I'm not sure we got that settled. 4 or 5 years of age? Or?
No, I was 2 years old.
Oh,
when
so
I left. Yeah, I was very young.
While you're still.
Yeah, and it was shortly before Castro came to power. So we immigrated to the United States, and we lived with my grandmother in Astoria, New York, in Queens, and we stayed there until my sister was born. Um, and then in 1962, my father got a job in Los Angeles, which was thrilling because the cold in New York was starting to be much for them being from Cuba. And so they, you know, drove across the country and moved to LA, and that's where they still are. They're still living in Los Angeles, and my father still he has his own architectural firm. He's 89 years old, and he works 6 days a week. And my mother is doing very well. She's 84, and she's working part time, and she teaches English and Spanish as second languages, and so they're very active, and luckily they're in very good shape.
Boy, that's the secret of longevity, keeping the head, the mind going, being active and creative. Architecture, give me a break. That's fabulous for your father. Let's kind of get back on topic here. You studied with Isai. Tell me about this man and this technique, this French-Belgian school of violin playing. I think I kind of understand what it is, but I want to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Well, but first of all, just to be clear, I didn't study with Isai.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry.
That would have made me 120 years old.
Yeah, exactly. It was Joseph Gingold that you studied with, and his
Yeah.
teacher was Isai. So thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
You're looking
Yeah.
very good for your age, by the way.
I'm not too worn out. One of the things that's very important in violin playing is that, we all kind of, it's almost like that Ancestry.com thing. We all have a very definitive background as violinists. We all come from certain branches. And the most important teacher probably that ever lived was Viotti, because Viotti left Italy and started developing and establishing schools in different places all over the world. And so he began in St. Petersburg, and he went to Poland, and he went to Germany, and of course he went to Belgium, and all these different places. And he kind of got schools started. Then, of course, they started developing their own styles and their own ways of playing, their own techniques, their own sound. And of course, their own associations, like in the the French school to be more specific. The French school, oddly enough, their collaborations in the Romantic period were with Sarasate, the great Spanish violinist, and Wieniawski, the great Polish violinist. And of course, people don't realize they're Spanish and Polish, but they studied at the Paris Conservatory. Hence, all the works that were written for them by Saint-Saëns, by Lalo, et cetera, et cetera. All these composers were writing for them because they were Franco-Belgian, or basically French school violin players. The Franco-Belgian is sort of a fusion of Vieuxtemps, who really was the major exponent in the Belgian school. So I can trace back to Corelli all of my former teachers, and some of them are pretty astounding, like Kreutzer, who wrote the famous 42 etudes, and then De Berrio, who wrote a lot of kid-type concertos. He's a good composer, but a lot of kid-type concertos that you learn when you're quite young and starting to develop a technique. And on top of that, Isai. And so Vieuxtemps was Isai's teacher. And up until the time of Vieuxtemps, it was still sort of a right-hand technique that involved pyrotechnics, a lot of staccato, throwing the bow, flying spiccatos, a lot of short notes, a lot of ricochet. Isai came along, and he was a physical specimen that was very unusual. He was about 6'5", weighed close to 300 pounds. And so when he played at the tip of the bow, that was like the middle for everybody else. And so he started to develop a style of expression with the bow that revolutionized not only the way we play with the bow, but it revolutionized music. Hence, you take a piece by Chausson, like the poem, the lines are very long. They're very linear lines. If you take a piece by Vieuxtemps, you're going to find it's quite vertical, a lot of choppy playing in the right hand. But with Isai's influence, the linear writing became the mode for for that period. Um, and so, actually, Isai influenced severely how composers began writing for the violin. They started writing with confidence, a much more linear approach. And so he revolutionized the right arm. And then, of course, my teacher, Mr. Kingel, studied with him in Belgium for 2 years, and brought back, of course, this unbelievable amount of knowledge, having studied with Isai. And then, of course, he told me everything that I can possibly know about Isai, every detail of his personal life, everything about how he taught, how he played everything, his bowings for so many different pieces, and how he pulled the bow, and uh, things about his personal life. He was diabetic. He lost his leg in the last year of his life from diabetes. Uh, he influenced so many people. He wrote the six violin sonatas, solo violin sonatas. He sketched them out in 3 days, and then finished them off in a week.
That I
And
didn't know. That's amazing.
he sketched them out in 3 days, and then there are stories behind each of those sonatas that people don't know, like the numbering of them, the keys, the dedicatees, and what the correlations are. So, for instance, in the fourth sonata, it's an E minor, and it's dedicated to Chrysler. The last movement has an uncanny resemblance to Preludium and Allegro. It's in the same key, and there's some passages that sound very much like Preludium and Allegro. And it's all a little bit disguised, but that was Isaiah's way of honoring Chrysler. In the third sonata, it's dedicated to Ionesco, and it's a very free kind of, I would say, improvisatory kind of writing, which was reminiscent of the third sonata that Ionesco wrote, which was kind of a gypsy sonata, but nonetheless extremely free and without really a time signature. And so it was the same with the Ballade, the third sonata. So it's not a coincidence that it's the third. It's not a coincidence that the fourth is an E minor. There are many, many little tiny things, but most of the time you buy an edition for $100 and it doesn't tell you that. You can only know that by having studied with a master like Mr. Kingel, who passed it on. It's really no different than Native American lore, or they didn't write stuff down. All their ancestors talked about it, and they handed it down to their offspring, and they continued the tradition this way. So, when you buy a Henley edition, a lot of times I just kind of laugh about it. And I said, that's all fine. You just spent $100, but you really need to know isn't in there. So,
by the way, because you are a conductor also, I think this is very, very much an important aspect of how we work as conductors, and you've just described it in all music. The subtexts, the hidden meanings, the secrets, the little fragments, all of that stuff. A long time ago, I realized that composers hold secrets.
yes.
These are little boxes of secrets that they present to us and then let us figure it out. I don't understand how composers can do that without blabbing the secrets. You know what I mean? I want everybody to know if I'm working something out and I've got a secret here and a fragment there. But they do this. They write these compositions, and then 150 years later, some of us manage to figure out the codes and so on.
Yeah.
It's just so fascinating about genius, really, and that's the art form we're in. Come on.
If you take the excuse me, if you take the chanson, you'll see the first three notes are D, A, E, which are the open strings of the violin. The E is an inversion of the open E, but it's representing the open strings. And guess who came along 40 years later, wrote a piece basically in the same premise, was Ravel when he wrote the Zigeuner. You have E, A, E, A, E, G, A, and then so there's no question that he's the same formula, even though it's an inversion, but he's using the open strings as sort of the focal point of that.
And of course, they all knew each other. They all looked at each other's work. All that fraternité, if you will, amongst composers, especially in the world of French music. But that is what's so fabulous and fascinating for those of us in this profession, to find the secrets, and they're there. They're there.
And it's a shame that, as Chasson died rather young and had a late start to his career. And I never really got too far into the Impressionist period, which I think could have very likely influenced how he wrote in his later years. But he died at the age of 44 in a terrible bicycle accident. And then, by then, shortly thereafter, Debussy died, and Ravel was the last man standing, basically, of the Impressionist period. So, it didn't last long. It was a very specific kind of short period of time that these guys all coalesced in Paris.
Let me ask you how you met the other artists on this particular CD. What's the story of the pianist Elizabeth Pridgeon? When did you meet her? And Vega String Quartet. Give me that overview. And then how did you guys decide the order of the programming, the Chanson de Forêt, or was it just you? Go.
Just me. It was just me who decided it. But I'm glad you asked me because, see, I have performed the Chanson quite a number of times. And it's a very personal work for me. It's extremely personal, mainly because of the connection with Isaïe and my teacher. I had played it quite a number of times. I would have to say that, I played it many times where I felt it was pretty good. I never really had a performance that I was thrilled by, that every component of the group was simpatico. I just felt like there was always something not jiving with the piano or the quartet or the style. And since I come from that style, it was difficult to find a coalescing group. But we went to the Highlands Cashiers Festival in North Carolina, and I was paired up with this group. Now, I had played with Elizabeth before because my trio was in residence at Mercer University at the Robert McDuffie School. And I had played with Elizabeth a number of times, and I knew she was a wonderful pianist, beautiful, beautiful player. But the Vega Quartet, they were new to me. And I remember our first rehearsal together, I was like, wow, this really sounds good. And as we kept playing it, I kept nitpicking and saying, no, I think this should be like this. This is a style. And they reacted so positively and so immediately. I just fell in love with all of them. And then I finally just said, listen, I've been waiting all my life to find the right group to record this with. Would you guys like to record this with me? And they said, sure. And I arranged everything. And then I went down there. We recorded it over a period of 3 or 4 days. And I was just so happy about it. It's something that it's something that I really wanted to leave behind. In terms of the Franco-Belgian legacy, I just felt like it was super important to have somebody who comes directly from that line play it. And, there are a lot of recordings of it, but very few in fact, I only know one other one that comes from that line. That's Josh Bell. But other than that, they're all very excellent players and terrific recordings. But I have a certain connection in a way that very few people have with Mr. Gingold and Isaïe, so I really wanted to do this. And the Forêt was something, I wanted to do something that connected Isaïe with the rest of the disc. And so I knew that he loved the Forêt. He talked often about the Forêt to Mr. Gingold, who then passed on some of his fingerings to me and his concepts of the piece. And of course, I love the Forêt, and I thought this would be a really good pairing. Because I love Elizabeth's playing, I thought we would make a great pair on this. And that's sort of how it all happened. But this has been a 25-year endeavor. I think at least 25 years that I have been waiting to find the exact right group to do that recording. And then luckily I found the best possible engineer and a fabulous producer. She's the best possible producer. They helped put this dream together for me. So
things happen when they're supposed to happen. I'm convinced. I'm certain of it. Fight it, and you've got trouble. Insist on something happening when it's not supposed to, or isn't in the stars. Forget it. So, and by the way, you speak to
with some experience.
Well, and you speak to this I mean, my audience is very, very, very largely professional musicians, so we all know exactly what you're speaking to. But it's important that the public also understand that the chamber music, you don't just sit down and with a bunch of people and it just doesn't happen. by magic. It's like finding that right mix. The corny thing is it's a marriage, and indeed it is. People have to be of the same spirit, of the same intellect, of the same level of play. It's very, very tough to get it to work. So I thank you for that explanation of for those who wonder how chamber music musicians get together, and when something is magical and when it is not. You just described it beautifully. How on earth do you juggle? Because I guess I'm not very ambitious, is what it boils down to most of my life, but I go to bed at 11. You know what I'm saying? When the day's done, I go to bed. What I'm trying to say is, how do you juggle this kind of a life of being a major violinist and a major conductor? I mean, one should be enough. How do you do this? How does that work?
Well, the first thing I think you need is what I have, I think, in abundance, because I have a great passion for my work. I just love my work. I mean, I have to say, I don't know too many people that love their work as much as I love my work. A lot of people go to work and they make a living, but I'm very passionate about my work. And there's never really been a day that goes by that I don't think, I really want to do this project. This is a project I've never undertaken. I really want to do this. And, I have a lot of projects for my students to pursue. Next year, we're going to do all the complete Paganini caprices in a recital with my students. I have a girl who's coming in who knows 17 of them. I have another kid who knows about 6. And so I'm going to assign the ones that haven't been, the others that haven't played any or haven't got a lot of them under their fingers. I'm going to assign them, and we're going to do a Paganini 24 Caprice project. We've done all the Bach sonatas, all the Messiah sonatas. These are all things I've already done in my own career. So it's great to have done them and everything. I played all the Beethoven sonatas in one day. That was a huge challenge to me that I really wanted to pursue. There are a lot of things that I just wanted to do, and I'm excited about doing them. Any interesting piece that I haven't conducted, I'm willing to do it. I just conducted the Daniel Poor Concerto for Orchestra. What an incredible!
I saw that. I saw the announcements about it.
Incredible piece of music, just exciting and just colorful and so incredibly masterfully written. We had a lot of fun learning it, and I had a lot of fun learning it. And I told the students one time we were rehearsing, and I made a mistake in some beats, and I stopped and I said, "Look, you guys, when you screw up, I'm going to call you on it. When I screw up, I'm going to call myself on it. I screwed up." I said, "But this also proves I need the rehearsal too. It's not just about you. It's about me too. I don't know this piece. I've never conducted it before. I need the rehearsal. That's why we're going to rehearse until we get it right, because I have to get it right too." And they kind of understood that we're all together. We're all in this together. It's not and so when I have willing participants and I have willing colleagues, it's very exciting. As you also may know, I just founded a new music festival in Miami called the Joseph Gingold Chamber Music Festival.
I don't think I found that. Go ahead, tell us about it.
We are going to, our inaugural season begins on the 7th of July and goes until the 28th. I named it after my teacher. I have a fabulous team of people that founded it with me, 2 incredible administrators, and then some colleagues. I have 2 colleagues of mine who are acting as consultants and their friends, and we're all equally into it. And so I'm thrilled about it. And it's mainly because this is another opportunity for me to promote the vision of my teacher and the Franco-Belgian style and the humanity behind playing and the discipline and craft of playing. This is a part that is disappearing as quickly as our climate is destroying the earth. We are losing the individual species of violin playing because it's become so global, and you get on YouTube and you can hear anybody play anywhere, anytime, and that there isn't like a definitive style or color or fingerings or bowings from certain parts of the world that used to define the way they played music. And so now, being so global, we're kind of losing our individual identities because we're sounding like everybody. And And so I love the idea of being able to really, focus and concentrate very, very deeply on that part of the playing. And we have 55 participants already, our first year, and we're off and running. And,
Well, it helps
we're
to
very,
have a name, so they're coming for you. Come on now. But you brought up a very very interesting point. Remember the sound of Eastern European orchestras before the Iron Curtain came down? Part of me as a kid, I thought, God, that's an ugly sound compared to what I was used to with American orchestras. But now I kind of miss it. I kind of miss the horn vibrato and other charming and the kind of interesting oboe sounds. All that stuff that made Eastern European orchestras sound so interesting and so unique. It's okay that there is a sort of homogenization because you know very well we're going to Eastern Europe to record.
yeah,
Those orchestras are fabulous now, but of course it is, this homogeneous sound. So
yeah,
you are doing more than just heritage for yourself, the recordings, the sound of you as a fiddle player for all time, but also this French-Belgian style, your teacher, all of that. It's wonderful. Um, let's see, what do I want to ask you about? I asked you about the juggling commitments, and you said, well, by the way, we all love what we're doing. That's the miracle of being in the arts, isn't it?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
I can't, I struggle every day to pay rent, all that stuff, but I'm so thrilled that I'm doing what I want to do and have done
Oh,
so all my life and that I love it so much. And you, I'm sure, have exactly the same feeling. And I wonder about so many people, maybe the other 97% who just go to work, go home, go to bed, go to work, go home, go to bed. They have no life,
no passion.
no passion. That's for sure.
I wake up every day with a passion to do something and accomplish and play something new. And I
You know
just,
what kind of amazed me? Oh boy, I've run out of time already. But what amazed me though is the tremendous. Speak to it for a little bit, unless I'm wrong. But I hear Franck everywhere in the chanson, in the forêt. I had no idea he was such a powerful, apparently, influence. The sound, that Franck sound, that minor, maybe even a little modal sound, that character of sound. It's certainly in the forêt sonata and so on. Can you want to talk about that? Am I wrong, or what's this Franck influence?
well,
Is it?
right on because Frank did not have a huge output of orchestral music or solo music. He had the symphonic variations for piano. He wrote the violin sonata as a gift for Isai and his wife at their wedding. He did not have a huge output. He wrote a lot of organ music, but he was an incredible teacher. He was an incredible teacher, and he was probably the foremost teacher of his time in France and in Belgium. And so those that studied with him got a very, very profound sense of orchestration ability, and they got an idea of color and how to really, in his music and in his disciples' music, the textures that he creates, that kind of very transparent texture is very unique to that style. And Frank himself was not as successful as his pupils. It's pretty interesting. He didn't have that big an output, but he left more of an imprint as a teacher with these incredible composers, and much like Nadia Boulanger, who had such an influence on Gershwin and Ravel and so many others. Yet she herself, as a composer, you know, pretty good, but not anything to write home about. And
We've talked about that. That's the real talent is composition. I don't have it. You decided you didn't have it, and so on. It's a very special territory. Excuse me. What?
my one of my composition teachers, he looked at my music and he said to me, I knew this is when I had to quit. He said, "Why is it that you write music that's already been written?"
Uh, ow!
And I said,
Ow!
"Okay." That was the period at the end of that sentence. And I said, I can't do this. This is not what I'm called to do.
Well, you don't want to hear my anecdotes, but pretty awful. So you a very special talent composition all by itself. I'm going to ask you, of course, what's up next? What's going on? You mentioned now the festival in July in Miami, Chamber Music Festival, in honor and named after Isai. Yeah.
Oh, after Mr. Gingold.
Excuse me, after Gingold. Sorry, I didn't quite have that right. Same thing, maybe. But anyway.
Yes.
Gingold
No,
Festival. So you're doing everything right, but what else is in the works? How often do you produce a CD? Is anything coming up, or is that just an occasional, what?
oh, I have about 12 CDs in production right now. I have the complete Brahms sonatas, the complete Hinnemann sonatas, the Beethoven, the Tchaikovsky concerto, a harp and violin CD that is being worked on. I have a lot of stuff. You know,
Multitasking.
I'm multitasking. We'll be getting them out soon, and then there's a lot of conducting and learning some new pieces. And this summer, I'm conducting in Bogota, and in France, or in Prague, and then concerto at the New Hampshire Festival, running my festival in Miami, teaching at the Heifetz Institute for a week, playing chamber music at the Montecito Festival in California.
Oh yes, yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, I'll be there, and then I can't even remember all the things I'm doing.
Well, it's all about making a living. But do you ever sit down and read a book?
Well, I like to read biographies. I like to read a lot of musicians' biographies, or painters, or something like that. I love art and literature. I'm not a nerd or anything. I also like to read Sports Illustrated, and I love golf. And,
No.
I love football and things like that.
You shouldn't know a thing about golf, being from Cuba. Oh, that's right. You were brought over at the age of 2. Yeah.
I should, but I'm passionate about golf. It's my only hobby, and I don't really have time for it because I got 2 young children, and they're really my passion. My 2 kids, and so I spend as much time as I can with them when I'm not working, and so there's not a lot of time for golf. But when I can fit it in, I try.
This is good before it's too late. Kids move on.
Yeah, I know. And both my kids are super talented. My daughter's a harpist, and my son's a pianist, and
wow.
they're winning a lot of competitions. And they love music, and I love that about them. That they love music, they respect it, they understand the craft, they're disciplined, they're very, they're kids that learn from us that, you have to behave a certain way when you play music. You don't just hack through it, or you don't just go, I got through it, or something. You have to deliver every day, no matter how you feel, no matter if you had the worst day of your life. People come and they're taking a night out of their life to hear you, so you got to come up with it and bring it.
Yeah, it really it humbles me every time I interview you and so many others, that the tremendous discipline and also the constant discipline. In other words, there cannot be any mistakes. Period.
Well, let's say that there can't be mistakes due to a lack of commitment. There are always going to be little things that happen. I think the trick is if you allow yourself to make a mistake, or you give yourself a break every time you make a mistake, that doesn't uphold the bar very well. And so you've got to be tough on yourself. And, oftentimes my friends will tell me, why, you just played really well. What are you down about? And I said, well, look, I missed this thing and I don't want to ever miss it again. I said, and I go to my room after the concert and practice it just to be sure I never miss it again. And so I have like a long list of like red flags for every piece I've ever played. What could go wrong? What not to do? Make sure you don't miss this. Make sure you take your time here. Make sure you listen to the piano. Don't rush. There's just millions of red flags, that go up for every piece. And the older I get, the more flags there are.
and exactly what you've described is so in terms of conducting. What a tremendous responsibility.
Yeah.
To lead other wonderful musicians. And the biggest, I don't know who said it, it's probably world famous remark, but the idea is those musicians have played Beethoven 4 times more often than you have conducted it, let us say. So the idea of giving tremendous respect to these musicians, but also leading them, helping them to see your way of interpretation.
Right.
So, it's a wonderful art form. isn't it?
That's
I'm happy. I hope you are. I'm sure you
yeah.
are. We're going to have to run this down here. I'm talking in Pittsburgh with violinist conductor Andrès Cárdenes, Cuban-American conductor and violinist. We have just mentioned his 2019 RTEC CD. I'll put all of this up at performingartsreview.net, the interview, the links to your website, I mean, excerpts, the whole thing. And then at some point in the near future, I'll write the review. I'm behind on the written reviews at the moment. But with pianist Elizabeth Pridgeon and the Vega String Quartet, Ernest Chausson, the concert for violin, piano, and string quartet from, I think, as I remember, something like 1891, the end of the 19th century. Gabriel Fauré, who outlived Chausson by something like 20 or more years because of Chausson's horrible bicycle accident. Killed him instantly. That's a good thing. Running into a brick wall on his bicycle. My God. But anyway, Fauré's sonata, the A major sonata, the Opus 13 for violin and piano. What a great pleasure to finally have had a chance to have a good chat with you. Andrès, many, many thanks for giving me the time this late in the evening there in Pittsburgh. Thank
Thank
you.
you. It's my pleasure to speak with you, Dan.